The Alldus podcast is brought to you by Alldus International, supplying your expert AI and digital transformation staffing needs across the US and Europe. Today, you are listening to our ServiceNow series, where we interview the best and brightest of the industry to share their story, advice, and views on the exciting world of ServiceNow and digital transformation.
You're listening to the Alldus podcast. I'm your host, Mark Kelly, Chief Customer Officer at Alldus International. As part of our ServiceNow series, I'm absolutely delighted to welcome Alex Ljungström, Managing Director at Einar Partners. Alex, great to have you on the show today.
Thank you so much, Mark. Absolutely fantastic to be here indeed.
Alex, before we jump in, tell me a little bit about you and your background, because we know you're from Sweden.
Yeah, exactly. I am from Sweden. But currently I am sitting here in Amsterdam, where I am based. And although I'm quite young, my background within the ServiceNow space and IT operations go quite far back. Approximately 7 years ago, I actually used to work at ServiceNow in their ITOM team. So that was here in Amsterdam, and that was a great time. And since then, I've had a long journey. For example, I used to head up and lead the ServiceNow ITOM practice at Fujitsu across EMEA a few years ago. And these days, I am on the happy adventure of heading up this Einar Partners company. So that is, me in a short nutshell. And I'm very fascinated and passionate about everything which has to do with IT operations and especially the human side around that.
So tell us about the work that you do in ServiceNow, but also tell us a little bit about what got you in this field.
So these days, I am mostly working on a strategic level with our clients and customers. So really driving through the changes to their operating model, especially in IT operations and AIOps then. And for me, I have always been a person who is very passionate about making the complex simple. So for me, ServiceNow has always been a great platform, really, where I really get to exercise that muscle, so to speak. So I'm a bit of an abstract thinker like that, but these days I am on a strategic level working, although I do come from a technical background, and that was really my entry point.
So for people that don't know, we're going to delve into AIOps. What is AIOps and why is it important?
Yeah, the golden question. What is AIOps? The thing with AIOps is that you hear a lot of different definitions of it. And it was actually coined by Gartner 2017. And I always like to explain it a little bit tongue-in-cheek, of course, that it's IT operations on steroids. And really what I mean with that is, as we know, a modern enterprise these days, you have a lot of IT operations in Azure, in Amazon, your own data centers, you name it. It's growing more and more for every year, especially with DevOps on the rise. And AIOps is really taking all of these IT operations and applying machine learning on all of that data which is generated. Because it's simply too much data these days for people to triage through. And that is ideally where AIOps comes into the picture and help. And in matter of fact, it stands for algorithmic IT operations. So
when we think about it being useful, have you got some case studies, and ideally novice case studies, that people can get their head around where they can think, okay, this can help me in my business?
Yeah, absolutely. So fundamentally, what it really is about comes in two aspects. One, I'm going to start now very briefly with the technical aspect, and that's where we're looking at things such as noise reduction. So Forrester did a report, I think it was 2 years ago, and in average, an enterprise today use 50 or more monitoring tools. So that's a clear case where AIOps come into the picture and it reduced the alert fatigue and it reduced the noise in monitoring tools. But it's not only that, it also gives that bigger picture of knowing how the IT operations is interconnected with each other the different systems across the clouds and so forth. So it has a larger, let's say, good upside on the transparency side of things. But fundamentally, it really is about making the work more fun and efficient for IT operations, for engineers.
So we're looking at specific problems
Mm.
and how you would enable customers to overcome those problems. Can you give us some examples? It may not need customer names, but just as nitty-gritty as you can.
Let's take a simple example. We see many customers still today, they're monitoring teams, they are reviewing all of these dashboards and screens, and the alerts simply get too much. You have many different monitoring tools, for example, and this is where we have helped customers to really take all of that data, group it together, and do quite intelligent, let's say, correlation between different monitoring tools then. And that way you can reduce the amount of incidents, you can speed up the process of troubleshooting. So it really is about that kind of root cause analysis, impact analysis, and those areas.
It does. What type of return on investment could people expect? And I know that's a bit like how long is a piece of string, but in terms of efficiency, money, time saved, security, because if you're going to be positioning this to your superior in terms of approval for budgets, how do you pitch it?
Yeah, excellent question. And I love this one. So I see the ROI from two perspectives, and we must separate them. So the first one is a cultural perspective. It has a huge advantage with AIOps in culture. We hear a lot about being data-driven, and AIOps is one, in my opinion, of the few, let's say, areas that an enterprise can use where machine learning really is useful and it really helps. And that can just give a sense of modernity, that you are a modern data-driven company in the workforce. But more importantly, it can also reduce, for example, burnouts for engineers, because they don't need to work with same boring, mundane tasks day out and day in, because the machine learning is doing that for them. So that's on the cultural aspect. In the more numbers and so forth, the time to value ranges from, I would say, everything from 3 months up to a year, usually. The ROI there, it can sometimes directly be seen on the P&L and the bottom line. For example, less high priority incidents, less outages. And if we're speaking about what I referred to earlier, noise reduction, I often personally have witnessed up to 90% less alerts that engineers needs to focus on. So it can have a quite substantial, let's say, tangible ROI as well.
You are listening to the Alldus podcast. When you're looking to scale your team, or if you are interested in showcasing your company in a future episode, reach out today. Or if you're in the market for a new role, visit our website to view open positions, www.alldus.com.
People can underestimate how much pressure engineers can be under by the constant alert and burnout and these mission critical systems that you're working on. So the impact that can have to team morale and day to day is huge.
Absolutely. Matter of fact, Mark, if you look at Google, they have a expression which they call toil. And the more toil a company have, the higher degree of burnouts among the engineer, the higher degree of attrition rate, people dropping off, etc. And Google tries to be roughly below 40% toil, which means that 60% is reserved for innovation and creativity. And that really is what AIOps is about, unlocking those parts of the brain for the engineers and decrease the firefighting as such.
Yeah, because there's only so much firefighting you can actually do in
Exactly.
an organization. There's only so much, and it does impact your creativity and your proactive nature in terms of what you want to be, what you want to be like as well. So can you think of any kind of key learns that you've had over the way, or maybe you've had kind of key learns for customers that have helped you and helped them now think of new ideas as you innovate down the line?
Yeah, one of the main key learnings for me has really been that, as I said, I come from a technical background, and when we hear AIOps, IT operations, we all think of heavy technical systems, algorithms, machine learning, etc. And although that's true, it's rarely, let's say, technical factors, which is the showstopper. So one of the key learnings from me have really been to witness the human side, and that is usually the reason for, let's say, project failures. So it's not so much about the technical things, but rather, yeah, the people aspect. And for me, that is a huge key learning, that the people still remains the most important element, even in such a technical area as AIOps, so to speak.
Where do you see ServiceNow going? We've seen so many new acquisitions, particularly within AI. It's fascinating where the next 18 months are going. What's your thoughts?
I think it's going to get bigger and bigger. The world of DevOps is on the rise. The world of microservices and all of these things is coming more and more, public clouds, etc. So from a portfolio perspective, ServiceNow just has to get into this space, and that's why we've seen these acquisitions, and that's why we've seen this major push in the platform for really innovating in these areas. So I think it's one of the critical strategies of the ServiceNow proposition, really, to invest in this area. And I also think this is evidence of when we are seeing, for example, the investor talks from ServiceNow, that they clearly have this outline. So they are jumping on the train, just like many other companies are doing, and they can't afford to miss it. So I think we're going to see a huge amount of innovation and use in this space. I am very certain about that.
Yeah, we're also noticing people going from ServiceNow to ServiceNow.
Yeah.
And there's so much less code to maintain.
Yeah.
Workflows. Design obviously becomes very important. You can't over design certain things, but it's a particularly interesting space.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I think AIOps, it really latches straight into that, because part of AIOps is, of course, AI is easy, operations is difficult. So if you can have low code workflows, low code automation use cases, then AIOps is a perfect candidate to trigger those aspects of the platform as well, really.
You've been listening to the Alldus podcast as part of our ServiceNow series. I'm Mark Kelly, Chief Customer of Alldus International. In today's podcast, I've been speaking to Alex Ljungström, MD at Einar Partners. Alex has been giving me a little bit of an overview about Einar Partners, some of the work they're doing, and we got talking about AIOps, the value add from it, and where the market is going, hopefully down the line with new ServiceNow innovations, and why it's a particularly interesting time to be part of ServiceNow. One of the key takeaways I've taken from Alex myself has been the positive impact that AIOps can have on employees in terms of actually making sure that they don't actually have burnout as a major key benefit for actually having AIOps in an organization. And it can take between 3 months to a year, but there can be significant improvements and value add. Alex, thanks very much for your time today.
Thank you so much. Super happy to have been there, Mark.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Alldus Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. We are available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and any Android podcast of choice. You can also head over to our website, www.alldus.com, to listen to more podcasts, view our open roles, and stay up to date with industry news. Thanks for listening, and stay tuned for more great episodes coming very soon.